Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. It's a big day here at Pack 14. They're all big. We've got my new friend in the house, Matt Heim from the One Water Partnership. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So tell me, what is your group? What's going on? There's a whole coalition of these environmental groups, and I get confused.
Yeah, that's great. So, I work for an organization called Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We're based over in Annapolis. I live here in Salisbury, and our organization is all about working with faith communities throughout the state of Maryland, throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed, to find ways to work with them to restore our local waterways. And so we've got a program, which I'm the director of, called the One Water Partnership. And what the One Water Partnership does is it works in local communities throughout the state of Maryland to connect faith institutions and congregations with local partners that can help them find ways to educate their members around environmental initiatives, and also do things on their faith properties to help restore and clean up the water in our bay. So we're really excited to be working here in Wicomico County with the Wicomico Environmental Trust and the Lower Shore Land Trust to engage faith communities and restoration efforts right here around the Wicomico River.
Okay, I have heard about this because we had the Bay Journal did a story a couple years ago about this, and we ran it in our paper. So I am very familiar with this now. That helps me connect with what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is an idea that there's almost a spiritual element to what goes on in terms of the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in the environmental community for better part of 15 years now, and worked primarily in environmental education and advocacy, and love what I do. But got into this field very much from a place of spiritual motivation, and I think that sometimes gets lost in the equation when we talk about the economics and the science behind restoration, which are critically important. But at the end of the day, environmental issues are a moral issue. It's about protecting our local waterways and our environment for generations to come, valuing creation in all of its form. And I think that the faith audience has a really important role in shaping our culture in a way that takes better care of our environmental resources.
What's it like out there in terms of the public understanding what you guys are trying to achieve?
Yeah, so the One Water Partnership is a fairly new program. We've been operational here in Wicomico County now for about 2 years, and in a pandemic in the middle of it.
Right.
So there's some setbacks there, but we're really doing some tremendous work. The Wicomico Environmental Trust has been a partner with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, even going beyond the One Water Partnership. And so we've got this really tremendous network of congregations here in Wicomico County that have been coming together regularly for a number of years around environmental initiatives. To date, in the One Water Partnership since 2019, we have over 35 congregations that have installed restoration projects on their property. Through the One Water Partnership, we work with those congregations to help them find grant money to install these projects. And so we've raised, hundreds of thousands of dollars for these projects that range from tree plantings to tearing up parking lots and replacing them with pervious surfaces to help filter runoff and things like that. So we've had tremendous success, and we've got 3 projects here locally that have been either awarded funding and completed or are working towards completion here in Wicomico County.
I guess it makes sense because the churches, the footprint of churches now, look at Oak Ridge and Allen Memorial, they take up a lot of territory out there.
Yeah, churches have large parking lots. They have a lot of, impervious surfaces. And for those unfamiliar with the way stormwater works, when it rains and stormwater hits that impervious surface, it just runs straight into our local waterways, and it comes off, we like to say, fast and hot. So it's coming in with a lot of force. It's coming in with a lot of heat. And it's picking up a lot of dirt and sediment and oils and all sorts of pollutants along the way. So it's really important to try to find ways to try to mitigate that stormwater. And so, you can do things by installing cisterns to collect rainwater coming off of your roof, which will help slow things down. A lot of churches have parking lots that are really only used one day a week.
Right.
So trying to find ways that you can replace that blacktop impervious surface with other surfaces, or find ways to capture the rainwater coming off of that, all can have tremendous impacts on what's happening in our local waterways. The other thing with churches is they're local thought leaders too. And so when people see congregations stepping up to the plate to help protect local waterways, it's a real clear demonstration that they value our local environment, and that helps create positive ripples in our local communities as well.
Right. It's interesting when I go around socially, and a lot of my social stuff is the lunch that we have after church. It's all been ripped apart by the pandemic, but this was always an issue. The rising sea level versus erosion. Famous discussion on Tangier Island, what's causing Tangier? Is it sinking? Is it the rising sea level? Is it erosion? And these are issues that get talked about a lot at church.
Yeah, I think that having conversations in congregations offers a really great spot to have some really honest conversations about what's going on. And I think we can all agree that weather patterns are changing. I mean, we've seen here in Salisbury flooding issues over the past several years where, we're looking over at Canal Woods and the flooding that's going on there and the city park. And so we need to find ways to mitigate all of this rain coming down. And so when we're talking about, putting in rain gardens and cisterns and all of these things that treat stormwater, there's some other benefits that come along with it beyond improving water quality. It's also helping reduce the flow of those waters during those major water events, those major rain events. And so it is helping address the impacts of climate change that we're seeing as well.
On the lower shore, how are we doing in terms of environment? What do you see in terms of people, so-called getting it?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really exciting things going on the Lower Shore. We've got two tremendous partners that are working with us, the Lower Shore Land Trust and the Wicomico Environmental Trust. Both organizations have grown tremendously in the last couple of years. The Wicomico Environmental Trust with their Creek Watchers program is really keeping a pulse on what's happening in the Wicomico River. And the Lower Shore Land Trust and their work to preserve wild spaces and land areas in the Lower Shore. That's a work that's going to pay dividends down the road, and having these open spaces and these places that we can help nature do what nature wants to do in keeping this place clean. What's neat about my job with the One Water Partnership is I get a chance to work, in Harford County and Howard County and Baltimore and Anne Arundel. And it's just really neat to see what's going on in all of the other various regions of the Chesapeake watershed and what's going on here, and help transfer ideas back and forth. And I got to say, I'm really excited about what's happening down here on the Lower Shore. We've gotten tremendous support from the city of Salisbury and Wicomico County. And I think the One Water Partnership is going to be a great avenue for us to increase our capacity to do important environmental work down here on the Lower Shore.
Yeah, when you mention churches being thought leaders, I think that's so important, because what will happen typically is that people in Annapolis, Washington get ideas about things. It becomes legislation. People are confronted with it. They don't understand it, and it's up to the newspaper to explain to them what it is. And their reaction is always based on not really knowing or having been gradually introduced to this change or this idea. And so they think everything's radical, like a rain tax. It's radical, and it's not that at all. So much. If you've learned and followed it, you kind of get where things are going.
Absolutely, and I think that's a critical part of Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's mission is translating. A lot of what we do, we're not inventing the wheel. What we are is we're connectors, and so we're taking what's going on in Annapolis and Washington and what's going on with the Bay restoration efforts and finding ways to translate that into a meaningful language that faith congregations can understand. But also tie into their faith traditions, and so understand how living out their faith also lives out our call to help the Chesapeake Bay. And there's just some tremendous partners that we work with, not just down here on the Lower Shore, but in all of the various regions, and helping connect those folks with congregations. It's just amazing to watch the wonderful things that come out of that, and the incredible projects and educational opportunities. And the bridges that are being built, too, across communities that otherwise might not have an opportunity to connect with each other. And so, I like to say that with the One Water Partnership program, we're restoring the bay and all of that, which is fantastic, but we're also building community.
Right.
Which is just, it's a tremendous foundation building block that we can do so much from.
Right. And you also have a network of volunteers who can actually go out and do things, beyond the church campus itself, doing tree planting and cleaning up and things like that.
Oh, I absolutely, like I said, I've worked in the environmental field for about 15 years now, and I love working with faith congregations, volunteers, because they know how to get things done. They run and volunteer events all the time at their congregation, and when they plan an event, they've got it dialed in from A to Z, which is fantastic. I also think that the programming that we offer through the One Water Partnership. So, for instance, we've got a really great program coming up in February online called Faithful Green Leaders Training, which is a program Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake runs that offers congregations the opportunity to learn how to start and how to manage a green team at their congregation, which we think is critically important if we're going to be installing these types of projects and wanting to lead education programs, to have a team of volunteers in your congregation to be able to run that. The Faithful Green Leaders Training Program is a really great, I like to say it's the how to run it, but not necessarily the why. It's not the, go plant trees and all of the what you can do, but it's how to recruit volunteers and how to manage a budget and how to find a grant and apply for grants and how to communicate your stories. And all of those skills are transferable into any other ministry at your congregation. We're focused on starting green teams, but the folks that attend that, it's real easy to take that and transfer that into a ministry to help the homeless or any other ministries that you might want at your congregation.
Interesting. Tell me about you. How did you get involved in this? You said it's about 15 years. Why? How is this your calling?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I've always sort of been interested in the outdoors. I grew up here on the Eastern Shore, 20 minutes to the ocean, 20 minutes to the bay, and spent lots of time outside. I was a student here at Salisbury University, studied environmental history and did a lot of time at the NAB Center, which is just around the corner from these studios, or used to be.
Right.
And so, during that time period, I did a lot of research and focused on the environmental history of the lower shore. And in reading some of those reports of, first contact when John Smith came in and hearing how the bay, you could see 30 feet down and it was crystal clear, and trees in the eastern area that were so big, the hollows could be used to have horses inside of them, the flocks of birds and geese. When you read about the stories of this area, it sounds like the African Serengeti or the Pacific Northwest, and it was just this magnificent natural treasure. And not to say that it's not now, but the bay that we get to see is just a piece of what it once was. And that hurt me here, right?
Yeah.
Right in my heart as I tap on the microphone there. I apologize. I grew up deeply involved in the Catholic Church and had a deep ethos of wanting to protect the land. I also come from a farming family background with a really deep culture of taking what you need from the land and treating it with respect. And all of that sort of came together and led me to the environmental field. And like I said, I got started in secular environmental work. Worked with several local nonprofits, the Nanticoke Watershed Alliance and the Assateague Coastal Trust. But all along, what really burned my fire, where my fuel came from, is this calling, for lack of a better word, to connect spiritually, right, to the outside world, and that's what gave me my fuel. And so, when the opportunity came to start working with faith communities around this issue, I saw it as a real opportunity to tap into that. But also, I think it's a place that we need in the environmental community. As I mentioned, we can talk all day in Annapolis and Capitol Hill and DC about the economics behind this and the science, and all of that's super important. But at the end of the day, for me, these are moral issues, and we really need people of faith to start, they're already there, but to really amplify their voice in this conversation. I think that's a really powerful voice to bring.
That's funny. You mentioned the history, and I've always been fascinated by that because Quantico Creek used to have big boats in it. So Quantico was like a port, and Broad Creek up in Bethel,
Right.
was flooded, and there's a part of me that wants sea level rise to come back to see that happen again, for those creeks to be big, but it's not that simple in terms of all the matrices.
Yeah, and Quantico is a creek. When my wife and I were first married, we lived in Quantico, right on the creek, and it's a place that's near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love Quantico Creek. But that's a really great example. People don't realize, there was a forest that stretched from bay to ocean here on the Delmarva Peninsula. It's been clear cut several times over the last 250, 300 years. And when you cut those trees, right, when it rains, all of that sediment goes into the rivers and it's silted in our rivers. And that's, at the end of the day, exactly what we're trying to resolve through the One Water Partnership Program by
Right.
helping to mitigate rain, installing rain gardens, natural landscapes, harvesting all that rainwater. We're slowing down and trying to recreate that natural percolation of rainwater back into our bays, back into our rivers, to reduce the sediment. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and our faith communities can play a really integral role in helping us reintroduce some of these practices, or introduce for the first time some of these practices into our communities.
I know in my neighborhood it's a contest every year to see who has the greenest grass. So we go out and we buy all these different fertilizers for grass. not a good thing.
Not a good thing. No, not a good thing. And this is a campaign that I would love to see Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake work with our faith communities on. Is the biggest. I think it's a fact. Don't quote me on this, but the largest crop in the state of Maryland is lawns. Right? It's not
Right.
corn. It's not soybeans. It's lawns. And at the end of the day, lawns are really an oasis for wildlife. They don't provide a whole lot of habitat. We're constantly putting chemicals in them. And they're a lot of work, let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to keep up on a lawn. If we could just take a portion of our lawns and turn them into native spaces, planting native plants and grasses and trees, we all are worried about pollinators, bees, and things like that. There's nothing in a lawn that a bee can eat. But if you plant a wildflower meadow in your front lawn, there's instantly tons of habitat. And I've seen it firsthand in my yard. We're working on rewilding the yard. And just in the first year of planting wild plants, we've seen so many more butterflies and so many more bees, so many more dragonflies, which keep the mosquitoes away. Like, I can't say enough about the dragonflies. They're my favorite insect in the garden right now. And I think that's something, once again, that we've got a really great example here locally. St. Albans Episcopal Church was one of the first congregations we worked with through the One Water Partnership Program. They secured a grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust to install a pollinator meadow underneath of their solar panels out there on Mount Herman
Right,
Road.
and the solar panels were a big thing for them as well.
Yeah, right. And that's other ways congregations can help lead the way too, in demonstrating how projects, solar and alternative energy projects can work. So they're going to be planting a pollinator meadow right out there by their solar panels. They got a grant for a cistern, which is going to be installed on the back of their congregation. It's going to collect rainwater off of their roof, and they're going to use that rainwater to water their pollinator meadow. They also have a vegetable garden out there, which is, growing your own food is another great way to kind of reduce our impact and our footprint. And these are all things that we've worked with the congregation on through the One Water Partnership and the Lower Shore Land Trust, Wicomico Environmental Trust. We help them secure grant funding to help them install all of these things. And we would love to work with more congregations in the Wicomico area to help them, secure the grant funding to lead educational and restoration projects just like that.
Yeah, I know in my neighborhood we like to think that there's a buffer between us and the river or the bay, but really, like with all the rain we've had lately, our yards don't drain if the tide is high. So if the tide goes out, then the yards drain. So that right there is proof that it's completely connected.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. Eastern Shore, everything's tied to the water. It doesn't take long. We talk about knowing your watershed zip code, and on the Eastern Shore, that zip code is pretty short. It doesn't take long for things to get into our Wicomico River.
What's the reaction like? Are there people who want to embrace this, or do they follow the science, or do they follow their instinct? What kind of conflicts do you face in this?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think we run into a whole lot of conflict. I think what we run into a lot is we have people at their everybody we talk to thinks this is a great idea, right? We run into people in the environmental field that says, that's great, we want to get the congregations involved. And we get so many congregations that are really excited. And what we help is the next question over, this is a good idea, is what do we do next, right? And that's really what the One Water Partnership is all about, is trying to help forge these paths of partnerships where we can help congregations learn what to do and how to do it, and help connect them with resources through the city of Salisbury and our local partners, so that when they do decide to do things, they've got some muscle behind them, and we can take and turn that energy into something really meaningful.
If I have a business or my home, what can I do? What are easy things that I could do to make things better?
Yeah, well, I mean, number one, lawns. That's one of my pet peeves. So the more that you can turn your grass into native landscapes, that's, power to it. And the Lower Shore Land Trust is a really great resource for that locally. So I would encourage you to reach out to them and talk to them and check out their website.
Yeah, they have a great website,
Yeah, and you can learn a lot from them. I enjoy working with them. I learn a lot all the time. The other thing is stormwater. Your roofs, it's amazing how much water comes off of our roofs. And so installing things like rain barrels and cisterns to collect that water, even if you don't steer it to a garden, even if you just collect it in that barrel and then let the barrel slowly go into the ground, is so much better than just having the rain come straight off and straight into the river. It slows it down, it cools it off. There's a lot of benefit there. The other thing too, and I think this is the thing that's like a little bit overlooked, everybody wants to do, but we have to remember why. right? And we live in a tremendous area with so much natural beauty. I say get out and watch a sunset at Roaring Point, or go walk the trails at Pemberton and just take some moments for quiet and disconnect from all of our screens. And inspiration comes when you're there. Just remind yourself that, the place we live is a beautiful place, and we want to make sure that our kids get a chance to see it for the treasure that it is, and leave it in a better place. We've got some work to do to get it back to that, what we were talking about in the history of what things look like here. And I think we're taking steps in that direction, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I was proud of my family's historic farm down in Ironshire, south of Berlin. They could have developed it and made a lot of money, but they were able to sell the development rights and make more money than they could probably spend for the rest of their careers anyway, and continue to farm it. Life would go on, but they wouldn't make the big payoff. And I've always said this, the idea that there are just too many farmers who can't wait to sell the farm and move to Florida or something like that. So they've protected themselves from that, and they're going to be able to maintain these things in a very natural way.
Yeah, that's great. And Ironshire is another one of my favorite corners of the world. That's a beautiful area down there.
Yeah, no, pretty much no one knows where it is.
I know right where it is. Yeah, it's a beautiful little tuckaway corner. Yeah.
Not to go on about myself, but down at the farm, there was a historic family battle. We had a mill down there, and there was a dam, and Hurricane Agnes washed out the dam. So we could not figure out how to pay for a new dam, and by the time they were able to agree that a dam could be built, the environmental laws had changed, the water had changed, it became a creek and a marsh. You couldn't create the mill pond anymore. So the beautiful mill pond was gone, but environmentally, it probably made more sense to have it as a marsh than as a mill pond.
Yeah, and that's something that we're learning about all of the time. So, one of the things we're starting to figure out is just how critically important beavers were in the health of the Chesapeake Bay early on. And so now, from a restoration, and I am not a landscape architect, but there's a lot of work in trying to figure out how we talk about slowing water down. The role that beavers played in building dams and creating ponds and slowing water down creates so much habitat and really helps filter water and keep it cleaner from a storm event. There's a lot of groups, Lower Shore Land Trust being one of them, who are trying to take a closer look at beavers and trying to find ways that you can replicate what they do for the environment in stormwater practices and things like that. So when you go out in nature, take a look and look at how nature sets things up. It's often messy, but it's also beautiful and works really efficiently. And I think that, that's the goal in some ways, is to try to learn from nature and bring that into what we're trying to do on our congregational properties and our home properties.
People enjoy making fun of environmentalists for whatever reason, but I feel like the environmental community here has gotten a great foothold, and that they are well listened to by the people in government, and they're able to make a point. And they back up their observations with some science, as you mentioned, the creek watchers, measuring what's going on in the river. I just feel like there's a great relationship. What do you think? Am I off base on this?
No, I think that's exactly right. We live in a really special area, and I count my blessings every day to live in a place where environmentalism is held to such high esteem. I don't think that most of our elected leaders can't get elected unless they say they're going to do something to help the Bay, which is just tremendous. Here locally, I think we've had some tremendous thought leaders that have really paved the way. I think of the Fair family and what they've done in preserving the Nassawongo and getting countless organizations started in this area. We've got people like John Grout here in Wicomico County who's done a tremendous job with
John's been doing it for years.
He's an institution in and of himself. We've got the Kate Pattons at the Lower Shore Land Trust, and there's just some tremendous people that have really paved the way down here, and have really created a great landscape for the environmental community. And we're looking to help build on that and grow it and prepare the way for the next generation.
Yeah, I love the spiritual aspect, because I guess the poem, only God can make a tree, and that's one of the times when I really know that something's going on up there, out there, is when I'm watching a sunset at Roaring Point, like you said.
Yeah, one of the things I always tell people is that, excuse me, if you were to close your eyes, right, and just quiet yourself and think of a time when you felt closest to your Creator, or if you're not spiritual, just a time when you felt most at peace with yourself. If you close your eyes and really put yourself in that moment, my guess is almost every single person would put themselves someplace in nature, right? And what does that tell us? It tells us that when we feel the most spiritual, there's a connection there to nature that's hard to articulate and hard to explain, but I think should give us a motivation to take care of that place. And that's what we're trying to do, is take care of the place that gives us that special fire.
Yeah, I've got a book recently about Frank Lloyd Wright and how he designed all of his buildings, his houses especially, to fit into the land and to reflect the land, and it was a very spiritual exercise for him in that design.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like once again, we live in just a tremendous area to be able to be at the Atlantic. You can watch a sunrise at the Atlantic coast and then watch the moon come up or the sun go down on the bay, all in the same day here. And it's we should count our blessings to be able to live in such a beautiful, amazing place.
If I'm a parishioner somewhere and my church is not participating, how can I reach out to you to get you to come talk to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to. So you can visit us online at interfaithchesapeake.org. That's all one word, interfaithchesapeake.org. My name is Matt Heim. If you check on the staff section of that website, you can get our contact information there. My email is super easy to remember. It's Matthew with 2 T's at interfaithchesapeake.org. We've got some really tremendous things that are going on in Wicomico County right now. We'd love to have some more congregations participate, so we definitely encourage you to hop online and take a look. We also, just a real quick plug too, we have $500 in grant money available to congregations if they want to attend our Faithful Green Leaders training program and sign Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's Partner Congregation Pledge. That qualifies them for $500 in seed money, which they can then use for any kind of creation care project they want at their congregation.
Tell me more about your Partner Congregation Pledge.
Yeah, so Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, we've got a Partner Congregation Pledge, which we've just launched in the last year. And what that is it's an opportunity for congregations to sign on to the work that we're trying to do and affirm their support for our work to restore creation. The Partner Congregation Pledge, there's no monetary ties with it. It's basically saying that we as a faith community believe in doing our part to restore the Chesapeake Bay, and that we're going to host educational events at our congregation, and we're going to take a look at our facilities and try to find ways that we can lessen our footprint. Right now we've got 50 congregations throughout the state of Maryland who have signed on to our Partner Congregation Pledge. Our goal by the end of 2021 is to have 150. We're working on some of our first from over here on the Eastern Shore. We've got a couple pans in the fire, but we haven't had our first congregation signed. So if any congregations are interested in signing the Partner Congregation Pledge, we would really welcome them. And if they would like to learn more, we would definitely encourage them to reach out to Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, and you can check it out on our website at interfaithchesapeake.org.
He's Matt Heim from the One Water Partnership. We're thrilled that he was here today to help us understand the spiritual link between our environment and our conduct and what we can do to make things better for our natural surroundings. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper, another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it and